All right, just a quick review from last time. We talked about getting JavaScript into our applications, into our web pages. And remember, you can do it in one of two ways. You can either put the JavaScript in the head tag, which is the most preferable place, though you can put it in other locations on the page, including in the middle of the page. But in general, we're just going to put it in the head tag, and very soon we're just going to move it external so that the JavaScript is in an external file. And if you're using the external files, and you simply bring them in. I thought we did. Yep, there we brought a couple of my tools in. And you can put your own, you bring in your own JavaScript the same way, put it in a separate tab. As soon as you put it in up here, it becomes available to this page. So that's how we get it in. The JavaScript, the language itself is very similar to C#, except we can use $signs as part of our variable names. They're not typically used. But you can use them, and one very common use that Murak taught me is as the dollar function. So this is a function. You send in as a parameter some object name whose pointer you want, or whose ID you want, and it returns a pointer to that element. So here I used it to get a pointer to the form, and I issued the reset method to the form to restart it. We didn't talk about that too much, but here's some more examples down here of other stuff that we did. If my mouse wakes up, doesn't want to scroll. Get me a pointer to the text name field. And here's another one to the text name. We get pointers to any object on the screen. Well, it's going to be annoying if I can't scroll. I can scroll sideways, but not up and down.
Those buttons are notorious for going out.
Get my own mouse. Okay, so there's some of the stuff we did. We also took a look at the date class and some of the annoying features of it, particularly that it doesn't like ISO format. And it's not that it doesn't like it, it just processes it in a way that doesn't always suit me. What I mean by it doesn't suit me is whenever you send it an ISO date, it automatically converts it to Greenwich Mean Time, which in our case means subtract 5 hours, which means you might get a day that's different than the day you entered. The way around that, as we saw, let's go pull it up in the notes here. It's scrolling okay here, sort of. There we go. The way around that is to use some of the other functions. The toUTC string converts the date to a UTC string and ignores all the Greenwich Mean Time stuff. But that's for converting a date into a string. But what if I want to go the other direction? This gives me the current date. This converts Christmas of 2010 into a date object, and that works successfully because it's using slashes and not ISO format. And we also looked briefly at Chrome and saw that Chrome date pickers, when you use the date input type, gives us a date in that format, probably because it behaves pretty well versus an ISO format. Problem with this format is if you use it as a string, it doesn't sort very well. And the date class doesn't sort very well. So if you have two dates, or if you have an array of dates, you can't sort them very well. So we often store the dates as strings, then try to sort them. But this doesn't sort well if I have multiple years. Doesn't sort well if I have single-digit months. And so that's why most people, if they're sorting dates and want to alphabetize them, or not alphabetize, but sort the dates, they'll often use an ISO date format. So it's a bit of a challenge there we have to keep our eyes on. If we want to add dates, we can do it relatively simply. Remember, the getDate object or method gets the current date. That's the day of the month, the 31st, the 15th, the 1st. Add a number to that and then put it back in the date using the setter of the date class. Talked about all those last time. If we want to display dates in certain ways, then we have to import my date format.js file. And so here we imported it. And this is what's in. Oh, this is isDate. Here's the date format. Pretty complicated. Stole it from someplace. I believe I gave credit to the right person. There he is. Okay. He figured out a nice way to format dates. And not only that, he demonstrated how to actually change the date class prototype whole. That sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? For you Swift programmers from this morning, we were talking about protocols. This is kind of the same thing here. This thing change the protocol for the date type to include a new format function. And here's the function. This function simply calls that function to format it. But it's included in the date type, so when we use it, all we have to do is attach it to a date. So there's a date.format. As if it looks like it's part of the class, but it's not. It wasn't initially, but because we've imported it, it has now been added to the date class so that we can call the format function. This format function uses lowercase m's instead of capital M's for the month. Other than that, it works very similar to the custom formats that we had in Microsoft Word, or Word, good grief. What class was that? In C#. It does also, if you can remember them, I never do, but if you remember them, it does have some named date types, so you can put those in the quotation marks instead and say, give me an ISO date, give me a UTC date time, and you get these formats. So they're predefined formats in case you want one of those. This one's very similar and almost identical to the one that I asked for. In the customized one that I wrote, it was MMDYYY, I'm pretty sure. MM little d, is that what he had? 1D? Yep. So I could have instead here said long date. I didn't because I'm a C# programmer as well, and long date includes the day of the week in front, like Friday or Monday, and I didn't want that, so I created a custom one. Questions about any of that? This is a chart that I developed after playing around with it to try to figure out which of these dates formats change things. Bottom line, it's pretty much the ISO date format that changes the date. Except in Opera. There it didn't. Everything else pretty much leaves it alone. So we're going to avoid that date format in our processing, unless we're sorting, then we might use it. We took a look at the prompt function. The prompt function allows you to basically display a message box that receives a value. So it's in, I don't think C# has an input function or input box function. Visual Basic does. Looks like this, pops up a dialog box with a text box embedded inside it where you can type stuff. If the user clicks the OK button, whatever they typed gets sent back and is stored in my variable. If they click cancel, it returns an NaN type of string, not a number. So you can check for that to see if, actually it returns a null, you can check for null to see if it's empty. Confirm function is a yes or no. That returns either true or false. So click the yes button, you get a true, otherwise you get a false. So response is true or false, not yes or no. Did we do an alert? I think so.
Yeah.
Okay, so we did an alert. It's a good way for testing, or also a way for you to suggest to somebody or use JavaScript to send a message to the user of your HTML page. I typically use it for sending alerts when I've done validation and there's still some errors left. The user hits submit. We validate every field. There's still errors. Put up an alert that interrupts them so they can see they need to fix some things instead of hoping they can find them and see them on the screen. You can add backslash ends to your message if you want multi-line messages. We've already seen how to get input from the form using the getElementById, or more appropriately the dollar function. All the dollar does is redefines document getElementById. I hate to say redefines it, but gives it a shorter name. You say dollar parentheses ID and it gives you a pointer to the element that you want. The most common feature of the element that we want is its value property. Unlike C# where it's the text property, we want the value property of most of our text boxes. And when we get to radio buttons and check boxes, we'll be looking at their checked property to see if they're checked. Can combine all of that into one feature. This says give me a pointer to the text name box and immediately give me the value of what's in there. And I believe I ended by saying if you're going to use this pointer more than once, my advice is assign it to a variable like I did up here. and then simply use the pointer name. That should be a little more efficient, a little quicker than constantly going out to the form saying, hey, where's this ID thing that I'm looking for, getting a pointer, and then referencing it over and over and over again. And this is probably where I ended. We can change the value of any item on the field, on the form, by changing its value property as the form's running. The biggest challenge is figuring out where to put this, what kind of a handler to put that in. So far, all of our processing has been done in an on-submit. But as you'll see a little later, we can define all kinds of event handlers, including text change and leave events, those kinds of things, and processes we need to just link those to functions. We'll see it in a little bit. Take it back. We did talk about parsing as well. If you want to parse float or parse int, send it some text. These parse functions work differently than they do in C#. They parse until they can't anymore. So if you were to send a decimal number to an integer parse, or if you were to send 123 Volcker to an integer parse, it will give you 123. As a programmer, I'm still a little nervous. Wait a minute, why, the conversion function works, but why are there extra characters there? So the input may still be faulty, but I'm accepting it and doing the best I can with it, but that's the way parse works here. And if you don't like that, then the solution is to compare this credits to the text credits values, see if they're the same length. If they're not, then you must have left something off, and there must have been something goofy inside that date entry. You can also apply the date class, so the constructor, using a text box value, or if that's a date field, should be able to bring in the date field and process it. But remember, most of our browsers still don't display dates as anything but text boxes. Explorer, Firefox don't display any date pickers yet. And so you're processing text. Again, if that doesn't work, we can run it through a myIsDate function, which we also took a quick look at because it's very short. We take the string that we have and say, is it a date, by trying to convert it into a date using that technique we just saw in my notes. If this is not a date, if string date is not a date, it will return either not a number or invalid date. Not a number means it doesn't look like a date, versus it looks like a date, but it's not a valid date, like the 30th of February or something like that. So my isDate function just checks those two things. If either one of them is true, then it returns false. And that you can bring into your JavaScript whenever you need it. Did we talk about relational operators? I don't think so. So now we're kind of in something new here. These are not new. These are the same relational operators you're used to from Excel, from C#, from Swift, for that matter. Equal to, not equal to. Was there a triple equal to in Swift? I forget. I don't remember one. Right. Triple equal to, and actually it wouldn't make sense in Swift. Okay. Triple equal to means these two are the same and they're the same type. Remember in JavaScript, variables are not typed. So if I compare the number 8 to the string 8, they're not typed. JavaScript will do the best it can to make them the same type. And if you say, is 8 equal to quotes 8, you'll probably get true. Because JavaScript will do the best it can to make them the same type and then realize, yeah, they're the same. So I don't know if that's even possible. Let's try it. Come up here and on submit, and I'm going to say that I have a variable called age that is equal to 8, and I have an apartment number that's equal to 8 as a string, and now I want to see if those two are the same. Like in C#, you use a lowercase if condition in parentheses. If age double equals the apartment, and now I can put curly brackets in or leave them out. In Swift, curly brackets are required. In JavaScript like C#, the curly brackets are only required if there's more than one statement in the block. So here I'm just going to do a document.writeLine. They match or they don't. And let's see, where am I here? What browser am I? Oh, that's Notepad. Duh. Save. I'm back here and refresh. I'm going to turn my Firebug on. If you haven't started the lab, you might want to get to it here pretty soon, because any JavaScripting you're doing, probably want the Firebug on. Tim did let me know that my lab is a little out of date, but hopefully you can find your way around to installing Firebug. Once it's installed, I think it's pretty much the same. If you can't find it, let me know. All right, Firebug is on. Refresh my page. If I have any errors, Firebug will tell me both down here. I like to look in the console. That's where the major errors show up. And it'll tell me up here if there's a little number attached to the bug. That means there's an error someplace that I got to get sorted out. Once a JavaScript error is discovered, all JavaScript from then on is ignored. And so often you'll try to figure out, why isn't my JavaScript working? It's not that it's not working, because right now you still got a syntax error that you got to clean up. So if I submit, I should get a document writeLine that tells me whether those two numbers, 8 and 8, are the same, and they match. So even though one's an integer and one's a string, they match. Now my curiosity is getting the best of me. Notice I'm putting this in just to separate it from that other message. You could probably just comment those out as well. What about doubles? They match. Right. So it can be a little disconcerting sometimes. Sometimes very convenient to be able to compare two different types and say, basically, are they the same? Underlying values, are they the same? In this case, I think what's happening is it's converting that string into a double. I don't know which way it's converting it, but it's converting it and saying they're the same. Unless you use a triple equal sign. Then you're saying, these two variables, do they have the same value and are they the same type? In this case, obviously they're not. They don't match anymore. So that's the purpose of the triple equal sign. And there is also an exclamation double equal sign, which is an extra equal sign that does the same thing. Do they differ either in value or in type? Are they different?
Why would we ever need to use that?
Because you want to make sure that what the user typed in is a string that matches something else you're looking at that's a string. I've had many people tell me that's the one you should always be using. Why are you comparing two numbers? Is that one is a string and one is a number? I go with double unless I have a good reason. Paul?
Why wasn't your second answer on the new line?
Good question. Oh, what am I looking at here? What generates that page? What's behind the scenes? HTML, right? What does HTML do with extra white space? Ignores it. This \n is really convenient if you're doing dialog boxes and you want multiple lines, but if you want your output on multiple lines, then you have to use HTML. Thank you for asking. That one catches us in PHP a lot too. Trying to remember, where am I displaying? What am I displaying? Do I use \ns or do I put breaks in? If you're generating stuff that's going to show up on the screen in HTML as part of the page, that's a break to move you down to the next line, because it was ignoring my extra white space. Just like we did an example months ago now, it feels like, where we typed a bunch of stuff, pressed carriage returns, and then showed it on the page, and then all HTML goes across the screen. Same thing happened here. If you're ever not sure, you can always right-click and do the View Page Source. Right, and now I see the break here. And before I would have seen it underneath, but once again, without the breaks, they all show up shooting across because it's HTML. This is what's actually what's creating this page. Notice there's no htdoc, there's no header, there's no nothing. When you do document write lines, it creates a new page and it just spits it out. But the tags still work, so if I put an H1 tag in there, it'll make them bigger. They all still work, even without a body tag, even without an HTML tag. They all work. It's just not something that you would validate. And we're just testing right now. Good question. Compound conditions, ands and ors as before, and the not operator we've already seen. And this doesn't mean anything to you, maybe to Tim, maybe to Sheila. Visual Basic by default does not short circuit an and. You have to use an and also, which is really dumb. But all other languages, when you use these, they short circuit. Meaning what?
Means first one is false, then it's done.
Let's rephrase that. If the first one already fixes the answer,
Then it ignores the
all right,
second.
then it ignores the second one and never processes it. So if you're doing an and the first condition is false, anything anded with false is false. JavaScript and the other languages know that, and they never even evaluate the second half of that statement.
Because they already know the answer.
Because they already know the answer. So if you call a function in the second half of your condition, a Boolean function like isDate never gets called. A Boolean function or a function like int parse never gets called, and the number never gets parsed. And that's very common. Right? So as an example, I could do something like this. If and I love this logic. Not is not a number. Okay, because there is no is a number function built in. Okay, so if it's not a number, that means it is a number.
Just gonna break into Lonzo and Oscar here.
If it is not a number, what? Well, let's do a variable here real quick called my PTR name, and that's equal to that, because I'm going to use it twice. If the PTR name dot value is a number, and that number, see, I want to test this here, I want to be careful. And the number is less than 5. Right. PTR name dot value is less than 5. Right. This might never get now, if this is not a number, if it's blank, this doesn't make any sense, and it might actually crash. If this is null, comparing it to 5 might crash. If this is not a number, this is false, and this part never gets executed. Now, what I want to test here
Got an extra and in right.
Thank you. What I want to test is this is asking, is that a number? But this is text, right? And I'm comparing it relationally to a number. 10 less than 5? It shouldn't match, right? Where's my new test? Forgot to save. Son of a gun. Any bugs? Oops. Yep. It's not doing what I wanted to, so I started. You guys have got to watch the bug for me here. PTR name is null. PTR name.
It's because you're
PTR name. PTR name.
You gotta have another set of parentheses around PTR name dot value in the second one, right?
Here?
No.
Here.
Down below, over. The second value,
The second condition.
second condition, you
Here.
have a set of parentheses
No.
around PTR name.
I don't think so. No. That's not the problem.
where do you get
Line 31, it is here, says PTR name is null.
did you put
So,
anything-
whoa. It's null. That means text name doesn't exist. What's that text box called? Text user? No, text name. Oh, this is on submit, so it should exist. I didn't redefine it, did I? No. Variable, PTR name. It's the same as that.
I think you gotta have those parentheses.
No, you don't. Because order of precedence says this has a higher order of precedence than that, so it does this comparison first. The reason there's a parenthesis here is because of the function call.
Yeah. Okay, gotcha.
And this function has a higher order of precedence, so it should reverse the logic of that, but it's telling me that PTR name is null?
You're missing it
Where?
towards the very end of the.
Sorry? The first parenthesis here matches with the one on the end, so it should be okay, and that one matches that one.
Is
But then
not
your
a
next
number is
line.
returning a null?
I put in a 10, shouldn't.
That's gotta be it, it's returning a null, cause it's not returning not NaN or, not a value, so it's returning null.
Type error, PTR name is null, column 6. That's hardly, that's about,
And you're saying not null, if not null. This doesn't exactly work.
it's not null, that's not a number.
You have to do the dot value at the end of it. After TXT. No.
I understand what you're saying, because I could put it up here, right?
What exactly does that first condition say?
This one here
Yeah.
is not a number, okay?
Well,
So is the contents of pointer name, which should be the text box's text, is that not a number? But I'm reversing the logic, so basically I'm saying if it is a number, and it's less than 5, say it passed. Otherwise, say it didn't pass, or actually I'm getting an error still, so let's see if,
you need a semicolon at the end of the if statement?
that removed it for some reason.
There you go.
Bugger's back.
It's still thinking.
Dollar whatever is null on line 30, so it's like it can't find my text name. Did I strip out the dollar function? No. Okay, well, let's learn a little more Firebug then.
Step over.
If we go into the script here, I don't need a lot of space up there, so I can go into the script. I think I need to reload this, if I can remember where the reload button is. Just refresh it. Let's go back. Okay, and here's my JavaScript, and I don't really want to see that JavaScript. I want to see that, and that's got JavaScript in it. And inside here now I can set breakpoints. So I'm going to put my breakpoint on that line. put in a 10, and submit. But it's already gone to this page. Oh. Okay. Remember, once I do a document write line,
Oh.
the form's gone. So at this point, that value doesn't exist anymore.
It already uses it.
So you gotta move it, you could have left the other two document write lines and just move the var above them.
Mm-hmm. As long as I'm not trying to access the phone, I'm okay, or the form, I'm okay, which down here, I wasn't accessing the form, I was just using literals. But as soon as I started accessing the form, after the document write line, the original page is gone. I mentioned last time that a document write line starts a new page, just like that. So hopefully this will resolve the issue. You can see where my Firebug helped because it basically told me there's nothing on this page, and I'm looking at it. You're right, there's no text box here anymore. So now I go back one more time. I think I still have my breakpoint in, so we'll be able to duplicate that. Now I'm at my breakpoint, and I wasn't there before. That's because it crashed as soon as I said anything related to that. Just like any other language, I have not processed this yet. So now I can step over, and there's usually a command that goes with it, but here's the buttons, F10. And now I can touch, and it has the string 10. Right? And now that has a 10 in it. This should have a 10 in it. It does. This should pass. So now I'm asking, is the string 10 less than the number 5? If the answer is false, it's converting them to numbers. Think about that for a second. If the answer is false, go. They don't match. What what JavaScript must be doing is converting this string into a number and then doing its comparisons, because 10 is less than 5. If it were doing the reverse, if it were converting this to a string, the string 10 is alphabetically less than the string 5, right? Because 1 comes before 5. And so it's converting them to numbers. Does it really matter? It kind of goes back to Brittany's question. Am I better off converting this to a number first and then doing the comparison? The answer is no, because it's doing it numerically anyways. Because I could do this, right? I could do an int.parse. Int parse of pointer name. And that makes it a number before it compares it to the other number, but JavaScript's doing it anyways, so that's kind of redundant. Remember, when you compare strings that have digits in them, the value of the digits numerically doesn't matter anymore. It's now looking at individual characters one at a time and comparing them. So I learned something. I wasn't too sure about that. And that's probably good trivia knowledge for this year's trivia contest. That in JavaScript, when comparing a string to a number, what does it do? Compare numbers or compare strings? Now you know. Here's the if statement. We've already seen it. Curly brackets are optional. Most people like to put them in. If you need to do an else if, there isn't an else if, but using this knowledge that I don't need curly brackets allows you to simulate it. This else is an else without curly brackets. It's immediately followed by a single statement, that if, else, all the way down to here. That's one statement. So I don't really need curly brackets around it. It would read funny. So if you need an else if, you can do it. Just make sure that you put the else and the if right next to each other with nothing in between but that one space. This, to me, what's interesting in Swift is there's an else if, but the curly brackets are required. So else if must actually be a command in that language. Bizarre. Let's see what we got going on here. Demo in onSubmit, do a string equality check. We can compare strings. And that's kind of what we were doing, right? So here, let's just leave all this stuff and do some more things. Is there a turn this into comments? I thought there was. Comment, uncomment, Q. Control Q.
I think it's because you had the end if, so it can't toggle when it's 12. I lied.
Lock comment, isn't it?
Oh, this is toggle, and because of the mix, so if I do a K, it should do it. Well, just, what? Oh, I'm in an HTML document. Doesn't recognize it as JavaScript. If I was in a JavaScript JS file, then it would comment it out appropriately. That's not gonna work, so.
Maybe if you change the language up top, the comments might work.
Which language?
Up at top in the tabs.
Here? Oh, up there?
I mean, way up at the top there where you have,
The menu.
menu. Yeah, change that, go to the letter J and select JavaScript. It might be smart enough.
But then it would mix up all, then now all the syntax.
Yeah,
highlighted.
then you would have to flip back and forth.
Let's undo that. It's a good idea,
Does
but
work if you do it that way.
does work?
Yep.
Okay, that's all right. I can handle that too. Actually, let's move that down to the next line, then I can just keep moving it and be good. All right, so now what I want to do is on submit. I want to see if what the user typed is equal to Volcker, so we can do comparisons. If the dollar text name dot value is equal to Volcker, double, don't put a single there, you don't get a syntax error. Unlike C#, you put a single there, it won't let you do it. You get a syntax error in C#. Most of the other curly bracket languages, if you accidentally do that, which is very common, particularly for Visual Basic programmers, because that's what it is in Visual Basic, if you do that in this language, you will not get an error. It will actually change what's in the name to whatever you put on the left. Because what does the equal sign mean? Assignment, right? So it assigns this to that,
And it's all
changes
true.
whatever you put in there, and then looks at it and says, is it false or is it true?
It's true.
The only thing that's false is 0. And Volcker is not 0, and so it returns true, no matter what you type in that box, and it changes the contents of the box. So that's a nasty side effect, so be very careful that you put a double equal sign in there. Probably gonna get an error now, yep. I think I better put that back to text, just so we can test better. So you can do comparisons. In C#, this is not legal. You have to use a string compare function or something like, I think it's strcmp or something. It's not legal. But the only reason you ever ask that question is when you're sorting. And in C#, you want to sort a bunch of strings in an array, you just sort the array. And it knows how to do it. All right, so that shouldn't be necessary for you very much, because what that implies is alphabetically before. And usually the only reason we do that is to sort. So double equal and not equal are appropriate. You could use triple equal here. That means are these two both strings in the same? Well, if I'm looking for Volcker, the other one pretty much has to be a Volcker because as far as I know, you can't turn any number into that. So you can use triple equal signs there. And again, some Java purists, JavaScript purists would say, always use triple equal sign unless you have a real good reason not to. Because normally, you want to know, are these identical? That's really what it means. Are they identical? Same type, same value. Without JavaScript trying to do some magic to make them match. We do have a case statement. How flexible is it? Curly brackets are not required for the cases. I think in C#, they're not even allowed. Default is optional. Most people will put the break in, but it's not required on the last one because what happens if you hit the default, do these statements, what happens next? You drop out. So you really don't need a break that says jump from here out. You go in there anyways. In C# and in Swift, I think we discovered that it's required. Not only that, you have to have a default in Swift, and you have to give it something to do, like break. Break after each case. If you don't break in JavaScript, it will fall through, which allows you to do this. What if I want to check two values? If the case is this or that, there's no break here. So if the case is value 2, it comes in here, there's no break, and it processes these statements, so it hits a break. In Swift, the case statement works much differently. Need an example? Green says no. Anybody else? Not hearing you screaming. Okay, unlike Java, strings and floats can be used in a switch. That's Java. You haven't even learned Java. Or C++. In C++, about the only thing you can put in here are integers. Anything else, it fails. You can't put a string there. Here you can. So that's fine. That's good. I can do a switch statement on a string. And there's no way to use a less than sign or an equal to sign. And you might remember in C#, I taught you this technique, that if you want to find out which radio button is selected, say switch true, and then case RDO checked, so on. Doesn't seem to work here. All right, so here it says, based on the course that the user has selected, display the course number. So let's just do a quick example here. So again, now what? Oh, must be a good time for a break.